Robots Radio. Games, lore, stories, community. Just press play. Welcome to the Fallout Lorecast, the podcast that explores the boundaries of our knowledge about the world of Fallout. It's been a while since we've discussed the pre-war businesses of Fallout, and believe me, there are tons of them. We will not run out of these anytime soon because we are still in the C's working through alphabetically. This week, we have two smaller entries and then one major one, the Chryslus Motor Corporation. They're the ones who make the Corvega and the Highwayman, famous vehicle that you get to drive in Fallout 2 and then never get to drive any vehicles in any other Fallout games after that point. But also, the vehicles were powered by, well, nuclear power, but not all of them. There are some really cool details here when we get into this corporation and the products they make. So that's coming up. And by the way, before we get into this, thank you so much to those of you who have sent me comments on this series of these pre-war businesses and how much you've been enjoying this content. I really do appreciate it. It does help me understand what things you like about the show and what things to put out there. I also did get a comment. I noticed one where somebody said, bring back the gameplay episodes. And that's curious. I know some people like those, but I know based on just the total number of views each episode gets or listens, that those tend to not be listened to by a significant portion of people. But hey, if it's something that a lot of you like, then please let me know. Maybe I can find a way to work some of that kind of content back into the show. So I appreciate all the feedback, especially the positive ones, or at least the polite ones. And well, let's just get into it. Here we go. Okay, to kick this one off, we are talking about CHROMAX Genetics. CHROMAX. This is a company specifically having to do with biotechnology and genetics, chromosomes, CHROMAX. I think you get it. Now, we only have a reference about this company in one place in Fallout 76, specifically two individuals who worked in Vault 96. Now, if you recall, Vault 96 was all about being able to repopulate the world after the bombs fall with plants and animal species in order to make sure that life goes on. And I would assume that human beings also have things to eat and to provide for themselves. Now, this vault plays a big role in Fallout 76. I've talked about it before. That's not the point of this specific episode. So if you haven't done the content around Vault 96, go check it out. There's some cool quest lines and things. One of the things you'll find is that there were a number of different scientists who worked there, and some of what they were doing had to do with different species of animals that they were keeping in cages and doing experiments on. Well, specifically, there were two individuals who, before working in Vault 96, worked for CHROMAX Genetics. That's how we know about them. Specifically, there is Nina Valaya, Valaya, words are hard, and also Molly Cooper. Now, we do know a little bit about them from terminals from the Overseer about individuals who worked in the vault. We know about Nina. She was 44 years old, or at least the time of this terminal entry. She had a PhD in genetics and biology, 2 PhDs, double doctor. Her prior occupation is listed here as the founder of CHROMAX Genetics. She was the one who built this company. Vault occupation is chief researcher. So that might raise some questions. When did she switch over from this company she was running to work in a vault? Why did she do that? Well, we don't have all the answers to those things, but we do know specific dates. In the list of notes in this terminal entry, it says founder and principal investigator, CHROMAX Genetics, 2071 to the present. To whatever date the present is. And I would guess that this is roughly when the vault opened, 2077, right before the bombs dropped. Now, that's not the only entry in her resume that's interesting. Get this. She was a researcher at West Tech for 4 years, 2067 to 2071. Now, when you think West Tech, think FEV, think all sorts of different experiments having to do with mutated creatures and all of that, right? So Her background is very squarely on the manipulation of chromosomes, genes in these kinds of creatures. She also was a scientist at Oresa Polytechnic from 2065 to 2067, and the note here after that says that she was expelled. Why was she expelled? Well, other notes might give us some insight to that as well. She was the principal author of 55 papers of cross-species genetics, which is exactly what CHROMAX did, was that they worked on taking elements from different animals, different genes, and splicing them together in interesting ways. And more on that in a minute. But the final note here about her is that she's a brilliant scientist with flexible ethical standards, which may have led to her being expelled from Oresa Polytechnic. And we're not going to cover that company right now. That'll be in the future when we get to the O's. But this gives you some background on Nina Valaya and her role in all of this and why she would have been chosen to work in a vault specifically. I would imagine that they had to pay her a ton to let go of her company, or maybe the company was not doing so well. We don't really know. Now, what we do know is that she has a coworker that she brought with her to Vault 96, Molly Cooper, age 29. With a PhD in microbiology, prior occupation was as a researcher at CHROMAX, and in the vault, she was the chief biologist. She was a researcher at CHROMAX from 2076 to the present, so just roughly a year, and then she was the co-author on 4 papers having to do with analytical microbiology, which makes sense why she was the chief biologist. She's described as bright, timid, anxious, emotionally vulnerable, which seems interesting and might be telling about both the overseer and why she was included here, because the final note is inclusion, a condition of Miss Valaya's acceptance, undisclosed relationship possible. The overseer is implying that these two may have a romantic relationship, and that's why she was brought over, not just because she was good at her job, but there may have been a personal connection between the two. Now, other than this reference, we don't get to visit the location of CHROMAX. It appears that this was something that was shut down before the vault really opened up and became a thing, before the bombs dropped, all of that. So we don't really have any record or history of that specific location, although that doesn't mean that it won't show up in a future, expansion or something. But we do know that they worked with the combining and the changing of genes, and this fits right into some of the experiments and things they were doing in Vault 96. So all of this plays together and makes sense. Now, one little point about this, the manipulation of genes in a biological specimen, whether that's an amoeba or a cat, isn't necessarily a nefarious thing. In the world of Fallout, it's typically tied directly to the creation of things like super mutants or other weird abominations. But in the real world, this is something that we already can do. In fact, my wife runs a research lab, and one of the creatures that she uses in her lab, one of the animals that she uses in her lab in order to do experiments is a mouse. And that mouse is a type of mouse that only exists not in nature, but in laboratories, because it was genetically changed so that the brain of the mouse used proteins in a similar way to human brains so that they could experiment on those proteins in a mouse rather than in a human being. Obviously, there are moral issues with experimenting on human brains. Also, how do you do a bunch of tests on people when they live to an average of like 70 something years? Instead, you do it on mice. They have much shorter lifespans, and if all the other details don't get in the way, then this becomes something that can eventually help with humans. So those kinds of changes of genetics in those ways can be very, ethically minded. I mean, there are rules that she has to go through. There are procedures. There are things that she does in order to make sure that the mice are well taken care of and ethically handled. In fact, there's an entire floor of the building she works on that manages animals and the ethical care of those animals while they're being experimented on. And I know some people will say, well, any experimentation is unethical and we don't need to get into the weeds on that. But it is something that we do in the real world and doesn't always turn into monsters. I think that's my point. And it's not necessarily a nefarious thing. There are a lot of very positive things that have come from the manipulation of genes and the research that we get around that. So just wanted to throw that out there. But in this case, of course, it's Fallout and it turns into all sorts of crazy, weird stuff. And you have people like Nina and Molly to thank for that. The next one is a big one. The Chryslus or Chryslus, probably Chryslus because it's playing off of Chrysler. But Chryslus Motors Company is where we're going next. And this comes up across the series. The Chryslus brand is something that shows up very, very early in the first two games. It's a vehicle that you can drive in Fallout 2, like I mentioned, even though we can't drive vehicles in the other games yet. Maybe that'll be something they add at some point. Who knows? But this is an interesting company because it plays off of a real world connection, Chrysler being an American car brand, and the concept of the way the world worked before the bombs dropped. The idea that they were using nuclear power to power all sorts of things, including vehicles, which just feels dangerous because cars get in wrecks all the time, right? Now, much like the Chrysler automobile company in our world and many of the American brands of cars, you might think that this company goes back a long way, but it turns out that it was only founded in 2070, or at least it started launching cars into production in 2070. I'm sure the founding would have been slightly before that in order to get all the finances and manufacturing and auto plants and things created, but that's the date we have. Now, this doesn't come from an in-game source. Some of these details only come from the Fallout Bible and Chris Avalon responding to Q&A questions in the early 2000s. So according to that information, in his mind, this company was only around for about 7 years before the bombs dropped. Now, because of this proximity to the Great War and the escalating tensions and the military movements toward the end of, well, civilization before the bombs drop and the wasteland comes about, the factories shifted in that very short period of time more and more toward the military effort. This is something that happened in World War II, for example. In fact, personal story. My dad's grandfather, my great-grandfather, owned a manufacturing plant and during World War II shifted his production to serve the war effort. And at the end of the war effort, at least this is according to family stories, so who knows exactly how true this is, when the government was providing subsidies for these companies to help pay them for the products that they were making, he actually turned it down. He would not take the money from the government because he believed that that was his patriotic duty for the war effort, because he wasn't serving in the military, but at least he was providing for the war effort, and he didn't take the government's money, which I'm sure cost him a considerable amount. And believe me, I'm not living on piles of money that I got from descending from somebody who ran a large manufacturing company. So yeah, I don't know the details of how all that stuff played out in the long run, but interesting story. So anyway, due to the fact that the company could only produce so many cars because a lot of their manufacturing was used for the military, the prices on the cars go up. Less product means more demand, which means higher prices that they can charge. So although they were extremely popular, they were not producing a lot of vehicles very quickly. So the vehicles became very expensive. We know in Fallout 2 that the Corvega, their most popular model, cost $199,999 to purchase one. Now, back in, say, 1997, this would have seemed like an absolutely ridiculous sum of money, but with how much prices have changed in the 25, 30 years almost from then, by 2077, are we going to have the average car price be something like $200,000? It could be possible. Like, that is not beyond reason. So maybe just another one of those little symptoms of our own world heading more towards the world of Fallout, which is fun and exciting. Now, these vehicles were known for being well produced. They were reliable, they were well built, there was minimal amount of upkeep, especially being that they were designed with like nuclear parts. You would imagine that the average person wouldn't be able to fix their nuclear generator in their car. So these cars had to be made well. And supposedly they were. The general consensus, and the consensus down the line by even people like Paladin Dance, was that these were good cars and reliable, and they used fusion engines. But maybe that was part of the marketing, because they did have a few different slogans that they used, which seemed to reinforce some of these ideas. For those who want more, they were known for their size and for being big, the kinds of vehicles that Americans would want to drive because they take up all this room and are huge. By the way, Just a little side point here. No shade on anybody who drives a truck. Like, lots of people drive trucks. I don't own a truck, but a lot of people drive trucks. Did you know that only 10% of truck owners ever actually use the truck beds to haul anything? Now, I totally get that there are other reasons to own a truck and drive a truck. I just thought that was kind of funny. I mean, that would be like buying a motorcycle with a sidecar and yet never putting anyone in the sidecar. And the statistics showing that for 100% of people who buy motorcycles with sidecars, only 10% of them ever put anyone in a sidecar. That would be weird, right? A little bit odd, but I don't know. Maybe there's other reasons. Anyway, the other slogans that were used were things like driving paradise, nothing can stop a highwayman, life is a race, win. So they're pushing these different ideas, like lots of space, nothing can stop it, so it's highly reliable. It's a beautiful thing because it's like driving paradise itself. Also that these things were fast, and maybe they were. Now, the Corvega is the most famous brand, and we know that not every vehicle that Chryslus made was nuclear powered, was fusion powered specifically, because in Fallout 2, you go on a quest in order to get a battery out of one of these vehicles. And it's not just a typical car battery or alternator because you're alternating the current and changing the current from the fusion generator to the rest of the power systems. No, these cars, some of them were actually battery powered. So not every vehicle on the road would, I don't know, explode when you shoot it in Fallout 4 or something like that. Speaking of Fallout 4, this company has shown up in every mainline Fallout game. Fallout 1, 2, 3, New Vegas, 4, and 76. Across the board, this is one of those companies that keeps reappearing. Now, you might be wondering, what other kinds of products did they make? What other cars are on the road that I saw are Chryslus? Well, they made the sedans, the Blitz, the Highwaymen, which is the one that we talk about in Fallout 2, and then the Cherry Bomb. The sedan is the one that looks the most to me like a typical 1950s car. It's big and roomy. It's kind of a boat. The lines on it are very Art Deco-y. You see these broken down on the roads across different Fallout games. The Blitz is a little bit smaller. It kind of got this long nose in the front and these lines that come down the side, and the section in the middle where the people sit is much smaller. It looks like it fits 4 people, but it's much more tightly confined. The doors even kind of slope in towards the top, almost like it's not quite a pyramid shape, but it narrows towards the top of the roof. These were coupes that were considered to be family friendly, so not as big as the sedan, but something that was a little bit, I don't know, sportier, but also smaller, probably cost a little bit less, although we don't know the prices for these things. Then there's the Highwayman, which is another big vehicle with the wings on the back. Looks very 1960s to my eyes. And then there's the Cherry Bomb, which is the little red, it almost looks like a little rocket with a little dome where the driver would sit. These were very small, but the concept of this was to have a personal vehicle that if you really wanted to, you could drive it and break the sound barrier, which seems super ridiculous for a regular vehicle that anybody would want to drive on the road. But I guess you got to play up your sports car stuff for the sports car fans. I actually like sports car design, so no shade on that either. And trucks can be super useful. So please, again, don't take any offense at my truck facts. Truck facts. I should do a show called Truck Facts. All right, so that's not all the details about this because there's a ton of stuff to go over. But some of the things that are more interesting to go over are the fact that, and this is a funny little side connection with a few different other connections here. So go with me on this. In the funnies, you know, when you open up the gum and you get the funnies and there's like a little joke or something like that, there is mention in the funnies of the Chryslus Rocket 69. It's time for that spring reset. I'm taking a look at everything in my closet and figuring out that, oh no, this absolutely needs to go. And it's about time I replace things so that my clothes aren't older than my 15-year-old. Now you might think that they lasted that long because they were well made, but no, they're in terrible condition. Unlike the new jeans I just got from Quince. Jeans have always been my personal go-to because you can kind of wear them for lots of different things, but maybe they're not your thing. Maybe you're looking for, 100% European linen with insanely soft flow knit activewear fabric. It's definitely getting warmer, and their flow knit activewear is moisture wicking, anti-odor, and soft enough that you'll actually want to wear it every day. So pick out what you want. You can't go wrong because they have prices 50 to 60% less than similar brands. And like I said before, they are high quality. I continue to wear their clothes all the time, and I know that these new jeans are going to last me a lot better than the other things in my wardrobe. And on top of it, they look great. They're so comfortable, and I spent just as much on the jeans that I am now cleaning out of my wardrobe. So if you're looking for something better, just all around better, go check out Quince. So go do it right now. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/falloutlore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. Go to quince.com/falloutlore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/falloutlore. Now, you might be wondering, okay, what is the Rocket 69? Because you just listed out all these products. Is this another vehicle? Do they have a vehicle named the Rocket 69? This is a reference to the song Rocket 69, which is one of those old-timey songs that plays in the games. Now, not all of those old-timey sounding songs are actual real-world songs. In fact, some of those, and we went over some of this in the song episode I did a long time ago, but some of those songs are written and recorded by current-day artists in a studio in order to kind of just create the feeling of them being old and being able to be used in the game. But the majority of them are actual old songs. What about Rocket 69? Yes, that is an old song, and it comes from 1951. Now, you might also be thinking, wait a minute, 1951, Rocket 69, wasn't there another song called Rocket 88 in 1951? You are absolutely right. And if you are a history buff that knows anything about the history of rock and roll and jazz and all of that, Rocket 88 is by some people considered to be the very first definitive rock and roll song, both due to its structure, but also the use of distorted guitars, which is kind of crazy to think about. And the way they got distorted guitars back then wasn't by plugging into, your Marshall stack and turning up the gain all the way or running through a distortion pedal. They would do all sorts of crazy things like break speakers in order to get weird sounds from their guitars. Anyway, Rocket 88 comes out at the beginning of 1951, and then another song, Rocket 69, which this Chryslus is named after, comes out about 6 months later in July. Now, details on all of these things are a little foggy because you might also be wondering, is there a connection between these two songs? Turns out, we don't know. I don't know. I've been looking into this, and both of them were written and recorded by different artists. Rocket 88 is by Jackie Brenston and his Delta Cats, which was Ike Turner's band. Ike Turner, Tina Turner, the guy who was terrible to her that she wrote songs about. Yes, that Ike Turner. Rocket 69 was by Collie Allen with Todd Rhodes Orchestra. And as I previously noted, Rocket 88 was kind of the first rock and roll songs considered by a lot of people. Now, rock and roll is connected very deeply to R&B, blues, jazz, all of these origins that kind of evolved into rock and roll. But Rocket 69 is much more in the R&B genre of its day. Also, the meanings of the songs are different. Rocket 88 is kind of more about adventure and freedom and getting in a fast car and going places, whereas Rocket 69, as the name implies, and yes, terms like this were used in the 1950s, is more about sexual innuendo, as were many of the songs of that day, especially in the R&B genre, and some of those do show up in Fallout. Now, so the question then becomes, were these songs connected? Was Rocket 69 a parody of Rocket 88, or just took a similar idea? It was recorded 7-ish months later, so maybe, but there's no definitive answer to this question as far as I can tell. There's a lot of speculation online by people who are like, well, it seems kind of convenient that these two things came out, but there's really no direct reference in the song lyrics, and I mean, it could have just been a coincidence. Also, Rocket 88 was based off of the Oldsmobile 88, which was produced in 1949 and 1950. So it would have been something that people were aware of. And it also used the Rocket V8 engine, therefore Rocket 88. So there you go. That's the version of that stuff that now connects back to the game. So how does this connect back to the game? Good question. I'm glad you asked. Well, only one of these two songs does show up in Fallout. It's Rocket 69, not Rocket 88. There's some speculation that maybe the cost of licensing it was a bit higher, being that it's a more popular and important song in the history of music and all of that. So those things have connections. Also, the idea that a V8 engine exists in the Chryslus vehicles in Fallout is possible. There is some artwork that shows some of the concept art that shows not only V8, but V2, V6, and VX engines in these vehicles. Also, remember I mentioned the cherry bomb, the vehicle, the car that was supposed to break the sound barrier and go really, really fast. That car shows up in the game Forza Motorsport 6. And in that game, it's the design of the cherry bomb, but it's renamed the Chryslus Rocket 69. So there are some connections here. So I know that feels like a really big rabbit trail, but this does connect back because all of this speculation and discussion about these songs and all of that goes back to the funnies and the note in one of the funnies about a Chryslus Rocket 69, which of course is connected to all these other things and everything refers to everything else. And now you have this in a video game. So there you go. A deep dive into Chryslus. Now, is there anything else we know? There are some other smaller little details, different kinds of mentions of the vehicle in different games, or the different vehicles, or the company, or the logo shows up, or there's different artwork. Chryslus is one of those brands that is definitively Fallout, much like Westech or Robco. We just don't talk about it as much because they weren't making, I don't know, power armor or turning people into super mutants or whatever. But it does show up all over the place. And who doesn't love accidentally shooting a car and having it explode in a little mini nuke explosion? Wonderful stuff. All right, well, that one took up most of our time because that was a big one. But we do have one more small one this week that I'm just going to throw in there as a little bit of a bonus here at the end of the show. Ciampa's Antiques. And maybe it's Ciampa, but it's spelled with a C, so Ciampa, or maybe it's Ciampa. I don't know. It feels like it's a little Latin-y, maybe. I don't know, some other language that's not 100% English. Really, there's not a whole lot to say here. I can't tell what this is beyond the fact that it's a sign. It's a sign for a store that shows up in Fallout 4 and Fallout 76. And on the sign, although it's faded, you can see things like family owned since 2055, Ciampa's Antiques, collectibles, and rare antiquities. This is one of those signs you find on buildings. Maybe it was a chain of antique stores because there's more than just one of these. But outside of that, no other info. This is one of those kind of decorative items you find in the world that makes it feel lived in. Well, we're already at the end of the episode. Thanks to Chryslus, they took all of the time with all of the details, but it was fun. It's definitely a cool company to dig into. But thanks for joining me again, and big thanks to our patrons, including our newest patrons, Jacob and Shiloh M. Welcome to the Patreon. So glad you decided to join us. Also, thank you to our Sentry bots, Germinator and Dusty Ray get shoutouts every week. If you'd like to join all of these wonderful people, all 107 of our paying patrons, plus a bunch of free people. You can sign up for free and just make sure that you get notifications about what's going on. Head over to patreon.com/Fallout Lorecast. Check out all the different stuff, ad-free episodes, join us on patron chats, t-shirts and stickers, all sorts of fun things. So thank you. I couldn't do this without all of your support. Also, if you'd like to help out in some other ways, then leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts is super helpful. Sharing the show with your friends, any of that stuff just makes this happen. Like it's all a component, and you being involved really does keep this show going, even in just the little ways. So thank you so much for your continued support. I'll be back next week with another, regular episode. You'll see what I'm getting into. Plus, hopefully, there's more info coming out soon about the big Fallout 76 update, which I think I kind of hinted at in the last patron episode. I think you're all going to be super excited about. It seems very, very cool. But I can't say anything yet. So I hope you enjoy all of that, and I can't wait to talk to you again next week. Stay safe in the wasteland, and if you have to pick a model of a vehicle, maybe go with the battery-powered one instead of the fusion-powered one. I hear they don't explode as often. All right, see you next time. To plug into everything else we're doing, check out robotsradio.net. Reach out to me on Twitter at robots_radio. Check out the Robots Radio Rocket Club, where you can join me and a bunch of our other creators creating your podcast, starting a new podcast, or helping your current podcast grow. There's more information about that on robotsradio.net as well. And you can always talk with us and the entire community, over 2,000 people on the Robots Radio Discord. Come join us. We'd love to chat with you. See you guys next time.